On the morning of the 2nd of February, 1685, the King of England let out a scream and collapsed, and the best doctors in the world came running. What happened over the next 6 days is one of the most brutal medical records ever written. And everything you're about to hear is documented, not legend, not rumor. The doctors wrote it down themselves in careful detail because they were proud of it. So before we start, you should know exactly what you're getting into. In this video, you're going to watch 14 of the best doctors fight to save one man with treatments so brutal that today they would be called torture. There will be blood. There will be poison. And there will be one ingredient in the king's medicine that I promise you will not see coming. Nothing here is exaggerated. Every step comes straight from the doctor's own records. And the strangest part isn't what they did to their king. It's what he said to them at the end. All right, let's get into this. Charles II was 54 years old, and the night before, he had seemed perfectly fine, but that Monday morning, something was off. His face was pale, his speech was slurred, and as his barber leaned in to shave him, the king suddenly shrieked and crashed into a full-blown seizure. Panic is not a strong enough word for what happened next. One physician happened to be in the room, Sir Edmund King, there to treat a sore on the royal ankle. And he did something extraordinary. Bleeding the king without permission from his council was a dangerous act, by some accounts, dangerous enough to cost a doctor his head. King pulled out his lancet and opened the royal vein anyway. 16 ounces of blood, nearly a pint, drained into a silver basin. For his quick thinking, the council voted him a reward of £1,000. He was never paid. But that pint of blood was only the opening move, because word was racing through Whitehall and the doctors were coming, not one or two. Over those 6 days, 12 to 14 physicians would crowd around the royal bed, and every single one of them needed to be seen doing something. Here's the thing you have to understand about medicine in 1685. These men were not quacks. They were the most educated doctors alive, trained at the best universities, fellows of the Royal College, colleagues of the finest scientific minds in Europe, and their entire science rested on one elegant, wrong idea. Disease was an imbalance, bad humors, poison trapped inside the body. Therefore, the cure was simple. Get it out. Any exit would do. So they bled him again, another 8 ounces before noon. They forced emetics down his throat to make him vomit. They gave him purgatives to empty his bowels, and when that wasn't fast enough, a steady series of enemas. They shaved his head and blistered his scalp with plasters of cantharides, crushed beetles that burn the skin until it weeps. They packed his nose with sneezing powder made from white hellebore, a genuine poison to purge the brain. And for his feet, they prepared a special plaster of burgundy pitch mixed with pigeon droppings. Bleeding, vomiting, purging, burning, a man in the middle of a medical emergency was being drained from every direction at once. But here's the twist that makes this more than just a horror story. It worked, or at least it looked like it did. By Tuesday evening, the king could speak again. By Wednesday, he was sitting up and talking with the very men who had spent 2 days emptying him. The physicians were triumphant. The bleeding, the purging, the blisters, clearly all of it had saved the king's life. So when he suffered another convulsion, the conclusion was obvious. More, and this is the trap at the heart of the whole story. Every time he rallied, it proved the treatment was working. Every time he relapsed, it proved he needed more of it. There was no possible outcome that could tell these men to stop. On Thursday, a fever set in, and the royal pharmacy got stranger. They gave him Peruvian bark, what we now call quinine, one of the only real drugs in the room, except it treats malaria, which he did not have. They gave him Raleigh's antidote, a legendary cure-all with dozens of ingredients. They scraped a bezoar stone, a mineral lump from a goat's stomach, into his drink, and then came 40 drops of the most fashionable medicine in England, spirit of human skull. Yes, that is exactly what it sounds like. Distilled human skull dripped down the throat of the dying King of England, and here's the detail that will stay with you. This remedy was famous across Europe as the King's Drops, named after this very king. Charles didn't just take it, he had bought the recipe himself and loved distilling it in his own private laboratory. The king was, in a way, one of his own physicians, and every one of them was making things worse. But while a dozen doctors fought over his body, Charles was quietly worried about something else entirely. On Thursday night, his brother James leaned close to the bed and whispered a question. The room was cleared, and up a hidden back staircase came a Catholic priest named John Huddleston. 34 years earlier, after a catastrophic lost battle, this same man had helped hide young Charles from the soldiers hunting him, soldiers who would have executed him on the spot. Huddleston had once saved the king's life. Now he was smuggled in to save, as Charles saw it, his soul. In total secrecy, the head of the Protestant Church of England converted to Catholicism on his deathbed. It was so explosive that most of the court never knew it happened. Think about that for a second. The only treatment Charles actually asked for in those 6 days had nothing to do with medicine. By Friday morning, everyone in the room knew. Charles knew too. And this is where he delivers one of the most famous lines in royal history. He looked at the men who had bled, blistered, and purged him for 5 straight days, and he apologized to them. He said he was sorry to be an unconscionable time a-dying. He asked his brother to care for his mistresses with one last request: let not poor Nellie starve. Then he asked for the curtains to be opened so he could see the morning light one last time. The physicians had exactly one response left in them. As their king lay dying in front of them, they opened his veins and drew 12 more ounces of blood. It was their final act of medicine. By late morning, he was unconscious. And just before noon, Charles II was dead. So what actually killed him? Modern doctors have argued about it for over a century. The leading theory today is kidney failure. Charles suffered from chronic gout, a disease that slowly destroys the kidneys, and the seizures and confusion fit uremia, the body poisoning itself as the kidneys shut down, which means his doctors were facing a disease that nobody on earth in 1685 could have cured. They didn't cause his illness, but here's the uncomfortable part. Every single thing they did, the bleeding, the vomiting, the purging, the blistering, drain fluid from a body whose kidneys were already failing. For this specific disease, their treatment was close to the worst possible thing they could have done. Modern analysis suggests they very likely made his final days both shorter and far more agonizing. At least 46 ounces of blood documented in the physician's own hand. And the man who kept that record, Sir Charles Scarburg, summed up the whole ordeal with one chilling, proud conclusion: nothing, he wrote, was left untried. Here's what makes this story worth remembering. 340 years later, not one of those physicians was evil. They were rigorous, devoted, elite, and they documented their own disaster in loving detail because by everything they knew, they had done a flawless job. The scariest thing in that bedchamber was never the lancet or the skull drops. It was certainty. We did everything we could, said by men who never once asked whether everything was too much, which makes you wonder which of our own confident treatments will sound like pigeon droppings 300 years from now. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. And the next time someone tells you nothing was left untried, remember the 6 days of Charles II.